to Ballot Battleground, Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Margiott, a reporter at News 4 Reno and Fox 11. I'm passionate about making politics in our critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics. He was maybe the most powerful politician to ever hail from the great state of Nevada, and he left an incredible legacy, a machine that drives Nevada politics to this day. Of course, I'm talking about the late Harry Reid, the man who rose from such humble beginnings in Searchlight, Nevada, to the highest halls of power in Washington, D.C. So much has been said and written about Harry Reid, but in Jon Ralston's new book, so much more is uncovered about his early days in Nevada politics, his unlikely rise to power, and his lasting legacy. This week, the CEO and founder of the Nevada Independent, a friend of the show, Jon Ralston, on his new book, The Game Changer: How Harry Reid Remade the Rules and Showed Democrats How to Fight. And of course, we couldn't bring Jon in and not talk about everything that's going on in Nevada politics today, especially the evolving race for Congressional District 2. Who's in, who's out, who could jump in, and whether Democrats actually have a realistic shot to flip that seat. We'll get into all of it. Without further ado, my conversation with Jon Ralston. He's a friend of the show. He's always so willing to come in and even braved all the elements today to make it into his old stomping grounds. Jon Ralston, the founder of the Nevada Independent. Jon, thank you so much for being here. How was the journey out there?
It's icy, Ben. Reminds me of growing up in Buffalo, New York, where I experienced that a lot. But now I'm a desert guy down in Vegas, so we don't see this kind of weather very often.
Yeah, we get worried about the Californians and the southern Nevadans driving in this weather, so glad to see you made it here, luckily from the airport. A short journey for you, but...
It was, thank goodness.
So we're glad to have you here because there's so much to talk about with the book and Congressional District 2, and there's just so much happening in the Nevada political world right now. But let's dive into the biography that you just wrote, and it came out, I believe, at the end of last year or early this year, right? It's called The Game Changer: How Harry Reid Remade the Rules and Showed Democrats How to Fight. You've been covering Harry Reid for decades. You've talked to him probably hundreds of times, interviewed him. Why him? Why'd you want to make the book and write this crowning achievement, I guess, documenting his career? Why Harry Reid?
Because he was such a fascinating guy, Ben. He's really the only guy covered, maybe one other, maybe Bill Raggio, who everyone up here is familiar with, I thought was interesting enough to write a biography. But Reid was such a complicated guy, and he ascended to the pinnacle of power in D.C., and I argue in the book that he's the most powerful elected official in Nevada history. And his public persona of being this kind of uncharismatic, very soft-spoken guy was belied by what he did privately to make deals, to get things done for Nevada, for the country, for his friends and family to some extent.
We know him now, and for people who might not, I'm sure they do, listeners of this podcast, but he was the U.S. Senator from Nevada from 1987 to 2017, and then towards the end of that time was the Senate Majority Leader, a Democrat, of course. But before he rose to that level, that height of power, really, and you say the most powerful elected official probably in Nevada history. We haven't had a Speaker of the House or a president, so I guess Majority Leader probably the next closest thing. Before that, he was born in the most humble beginnings in Searchlight, Nevada, which I was just looking up on a map a little while ago. Grew up in poverty, right? How did he kind of emerge from that situation in Searchlight to make it into the circles that you need to be in to run for Congress and ultimately ascend to the U.S. Senate?
It's a great question, Ben, and he probably had a hard time finding it on the map. It's so
right.
small. It's really
tiny.
Just a speck on the map. Had just a couple hundred people when Harry Reid was born there, I believe. And this is the kind of poverty that most people can't imagine. He grew up in a shack, no running water. There was no medical facilities there at all. And I think that his character started to be forged there. And then when he moved as a teenager to Henderson, which was to him, the huge city.
Yeah.
But he was driven to get out of Searchlight, to get out of his humble surroundings and do something with his life. And he never looked back. He loved Searchlight in some ways because of what it represented, what it did for him. But he hated it in other ways, and that he just wanted to get beyond it. Of course, course, he had a picture of that shack in his office in D.C., and he named his PAC the Searchlight Leadership PAC, and so it was still near and dear to him. But he had Harry Reid had a great duality about him, which I discussed in the book, and he had kind of a duality of feelings about his hometown, too.
Yeah. Let's talk about how you came to write this book, which was there was a different biography or an autobiography penned in, I think the late aughts, 2008 or thereabouts, right, in kind of the middle of his political career. But he ultimately retires, and his successor, which we'll get into probably at some point, is in the Senate. And you still are like, I need to write the book. What was it about that book that just didn't quite do it for the picture, this biography that you wanted to be written? Because his story is a little more complicated than what came out in that first book, right?
So the first book was something that was authorized by Harry Reid with an author who was very, very fond of Harry Reid. And there's a lot of good stuff in that book, actually, Ben. But I still thought that no one really had told the real story of Harry Reid, everything that he did, where he came from. There's a lot of stuff that happened before he was ever elected in D.C. when he was the head of the Gaming Commission and was investigated by the FBI and helped get the mob out of Nevada. It's just fascinating stuff, at least to me. I thought there was a lot more of the story to tell, and I had lobbied him and his staff for many years to do it. I had a kind of a rocky relationship with the senator, though. He didn't talk to me for a couple of years in the 90s, and then wouldn't come on my show when I had a show for a variety of reasons, and so it was tough to convince him. But finally, after he was out of office for about 5 years, he had his office at the Bellagio on the Strip. And by the way, Ben, he had gotten me fired from
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, in fact, from the organization that used to run this station, he got me fired when Sinclair bought Channel 3 down south, but he had tried several times before, but he finally did, and I suspected it, but then I found the evidence of it during my research for the book and the incredible archives at UNR.
What was that like, that moment, finding the proof, something you probably knew to be true for years?
It was actually still, it's a great question, still kind of shocking to see it there in black and white, and I showed it to my wife, and she was like, well, she helped me in the archives. Well, you always assumed that, honey, she said, and it was right there. But he called me to his office, Ben, and he said, you and I have something in common. We're both survivors. I've told this story before, and I wanted to say I survived, no thanks to you, Senator, but I wanted them to do the book, so I decided to just soft pedal it. And he said, listen, I know I'm not going to like everything you write, but you're the right guy to tell my story. Let's get started. And so I didn't get a publisher until the spring of 2021, and unfortunately, he died about 6 months after I started interviewing, but I managed to get 24 Zoom interviews with him, which were just priceless, and he gave me access to these archives, part of which will be first open to the public in November of this year.
Wow. Obviously, we want people to buy and read the book and read for themselves, but maybe share with us one anecdote of something that was previously uncovered, had not been reported, something that really stuck out to you that only you kind of discovered in the researching and writing of this book.
So I found all kinds of documents in this archive. It's almost 1,100 boxes and 12 million digital files. I mean, but the special collections folks gave me spreadsheets, and they helped me find what I needed to find. So there wasn't a time I visited the archive, Ben, that I didn't find something that I found to be very, very close to stunning, if not stunning. But the moment I remember the best was when I found that he had requested his FBI files. The FBI investigated him for quite some time, and I realized that they investigated him for some really serious potential crimes, and for much longer than people thought, even stretching into his second term in Congress in the early 80s. They started in the late 70s. To find these files there, I can't tell you how fast I copied those, just in case they suddenly disappeared the next time. So finding those was gold, but the whole thing was a treasure trove, and he didn't vet anything that was put in there. To his credit, actually, he was a pack rat, and they just put everything in there.
Wow. This is probably a loaded and kind of heavy question, but obviously a vaunted political figure, a complicated figure who had, backroom deals and ethical controversies and the investigations that you mentioned. I mean, how do you sum that up? What is his legacy?
Well, I think he's got several legacies. I mean, I do think he's the most powerful elected official in the history of Nevada, and he brought more money back to the state through his leadership position that you alluded to. Hundreds of millions, potential, maybe billions, if anyone were able
Wow.
to tally all of it up back to the state and all over the state, including to rural Nevada, where he was eventually hated, and they hung him in effigy and put up profane signs about him. But part of his legacy also was passing Obamacare, and the president, whom I interviewed for the book, essentially credited him, said it wouldn't have gotten done without him. And I think most people realize that, whether you like Obamacare or not, that's part of his legacy. He's very proud of his environmental legacy, too. He did a lot for the environment and here in Nevada with monuments and wilderness and other kinds of set-asides. But part of his legacy is also the dysfunction that came to the U.S. Senate, and now everyone sees the polarization in Congress. He said things, he was intemperate at times, what I used to call Reidisms, but he even took those to the Senate floor. He accused Mitt Romney of not paying his taxes, which turned out not to be true on the Senate floor. He attacked the Koch brothers on the Senate floor. It was part of the duality I talked about, Ben, is that he was an institutionalist. He believed in the rules of the Senate, but he kind of violated decorum himself once in a while.
And I'm surprised you haven't mentioned the term, the Reid machine, which you probably coined, right? Reid machine, this kind of political structure that he helped to create, which is, for our listeners who you can describe it better than me, but it is all the political apparatus that surrounds so many of these candidates. It's the organizations, the advocacy groups, all of that help elect candidates even in difficult circumstances, right? And can help weather the storms in blue years, red years, whatever. I think I only interacted with him very briefly once at a campaign event in 2016 for then, candidate Catherine Cortez Masto, who that was kind of his legacy at the time, right? She was the handpicked successor, and he campaigned with her and set up the Reid machine to flourish, for years after the fact. Anything on the Reid machine that you wanted to point out?
I don't think I can say any more, Ben. You just talked
for too much.
But the Reid machine, of course, is part of his legacy, and I'm glad you mentioned it. It's been used as a model for others in other states. Rebecca Lamb, who essentially was his top political aide and oversaw the Reid machine, was asked to go back to Washington by other senators so she could brief them on what exactly it was. And it started, I'll tell the story really quickly, Ben.
Sure,
I don't want to bore people, but in 2006, there was an opportunity for Nevada to become an early state, which we still are in the presidential selection process. And so Reid decided to use his influence in Democratic leadership to get Nevada in that mix. And then no one paid attention to Nevada in presidential races before this. Once we became an early state, we were a caucus at the time. They registered 30,000 voters on the day of that caucus, and a caucus that previously had attracted like a high of 9,000 people attracted 114,000. And from then on, it was and you mentioned other groups were involved, like the Culinary Union and other what are known as C4 type organizing groups, and they managed to register voters and then turn them out. And because we have the early voting in this state 2 weeks before the election, they were able to bank enough votes where some of these races, including the race for president in Nevada, were over before Election Day. That's how powerful that machine was. It still exists. It remains to be seen how it endures after his passing, but it's still there.
Yeah, you answered my question, which was, is it as strong today as it was back then? Obviously, we saw Nevada turn red in the last election cycle, but in 2022, it was probably a great example too, where Senator Jackie Rosen and in 2024, Jackie Rosen, 2022, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto going up against Adam Laxalt. She got over the finish line just barely, and a lot of people would probably credit the Reid machine for that.
There's no doubt about it, and they have had, and probably not completely coincidentally, although the state has changed since Reid passed away, but starting in 2022, which was the first cycle after he had passed away, was when Joe Lombardo beat the incumbent Democratic governor, Steve Sisolak. That was a very painful loss for the Reid machine. But in both that cycle and, as you pointed out, in 2024, the Senate candidates barely got over the hump, and the state turned red for the first time since 2008. They had had 4 successive presidential cycles, and that was a blow as well. And it actually surprised me. But there were other factors that went into that too, Ben. The state had changed. The Latino vote, which was key to the Reid machine, had started to erode a little bit, and that helped Trump win in Nevada.
Okay. Where can people find the book, buy the book, and what, aside from what we've talked about today, what do you want people to get out from the book?
Well, they can go online and buy it in all kinds of places, including
Amazon,
Simon & Schuster,
Kindle,
Amazon, all kinds of other. It's in many Barnes and Nobles, I've discovered, and had pictures taken with me by my very proud wife
Very cool.
in those stores. So you can find it in bookstores as well. But I just think it's not just that Reid was this powerful senator, and it's interesting to see some of the machinations and how he got Obamacare passed and why he did the nuclear option, which he became famous and then infamous for changing the filibuster rules that Republicans now gleefully say paved the way for 3 Supreme Court justices under Trump. But his story, and you've alluded to some of it, growing up in poverty, then his early career, I think, is fascinating. The stuff of a Netflix series, we can only hope. Keep your keep your fingers crossed. You know, being on the Gaming Commission, being targeted by the mob, being investigated by the FBI, losing 2 races in a row, which would have been the end of a career in the 70s for most people, then being resurrected as the head of the Gaming Commission. There are a lot of twists and turns in Harry Reid's story. A race in 1998 against John Ensign that maybe he should have lost. He thought he should have lost. So I just think it's a great story, and I think of it more as a historical document that needed to be produced, Ben, if I might, the definitive biography of the most powerful guy in the history of Nevada and a consequential senator for 25 years.
Yeah, it's a must-read for Nevada politicos. The Game Changer, How Harry Reid Remade the Rules and Showed Democrats How to Fight. Go read it. It is a great read. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about modern-day politics, because there was kind of a surprise announcement from Representative Mark Amodei of our Northern Nevada Congressional District 2 a few weeks back that he was retiring. And he had a health scare probably several years ago, but I believe it was in remission. His health was good, and so this did come as a surprise to me. Did it to you as well, John?
I would say I was surprised, Ben. I don't think I was shocked. I think Amodei has wanted to come home for several cycles. He mused about running for governor 4 years ago. There's been talk of maybe he would run for AG at some point. But, you know, he's going to be, I believe, 68 this year. And I don't think it's as much fun being in Congress anymore.
Yeah.
And the Republicans are probably going to be in the minority the next time. And so I think it was just time for him. I mean, Amodei is a very, very smart guy. I've known him since he was in the legislature many years ago, before you were born, maybe. Ben.
Probably, yeah.
and I have to tell you, he had a great attitude about the job in general. He had a great sense of humor. He has a great sense of humor, one of the best of anyone I've covered, and he could even laugh at himself. But I just think he had enough. I don't think it was fun for him anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I did an interview with him about a week before his retirement announcement, and he was as combative and unpleasant, to be frank, in that interview as I've had in dozens of interviews with Mark Amodei over the years. And looking back on it now, it does point to maybe just he was done. He didn't, because typically he's been game for any question. He will answer it in his way. You talk about Reidisms. There's Amodei-isms where he kind of talks in circles and ends up not answering the question. You listen back to the transcript, you're like, I got to ask, a second and third time. But he does it, usually with a kind of a positive atmosphere about him. And for whatever reason in this interview, and it was about ICE and the raids and what was going on in Minneapolis, but he was so combative. And then that announcement came out a week later, and I think you're exactly right, which is just he was fed up and done with doing it, and in hindsight, that was maybe a foreshadow.
I think it was, and that's really interesting to hear that, because he's almost never unpleasant, right? But I think he was really just sick of having to defend every action of the administration, every twist and turn. The ICE stuff is almost indefensible. So why would you want to be put in that position as a Republican congressman? And so much of what has come out of the Trump administration has been difficult for Republican congressmen to defend. He's not the only one who's leaving, of course, but I'm not surprised that he did that with you, because I do think, I'll say it again, I just don't think it was fun for him anymore.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So now the 2nd Congressional District, it's been red since it was created. Probably the entire time that you've been covering politics in Nevada, it's been held by a Republican. Democrats are kind of chomping at the bit, though, here, thinking that there is an outside shot to flip this. I've asked many people this in the Nevada political world. Is that wishful thinking, or is there an outside realistic chance at flipping it blue?
I think a very outside shot. I think a lot would have to go wrong for the Republicans. Listen, it looks like it's going to be a blue year in general. That happens to the party in power at a midterm election anyhow. But that district is so friendly to the Republicans. Now, right here in Reno, where we're sitting, Amodei has not run as strongly as he has in the rural counties. But the rural counties, as you know, Ben, are so red. Yeah. It's very difficult for Democrats to make inroads in there. Now the Democrats have a primary that they have to deal with this self-funding candidate, Greg Kidd. And then this week we found out that Teresa Benitez Thompson, the former Assembly Majority Leader, who I think, establishment Democrats think might have a chance because she's got a base up in northern Nevada. She's been around for a long time, was well respected in the legislature, that she might have a chance. But I've heard this story before. And as you said, I've covered politics here for almost 40 years. That seat has been red ever since it was created and since the first race there in 1982. And the closest Democrats have ever come is about 5 points, a little under 5 points. And so if Trump's numbers really go south, and if it's a blue wave year, I think there's an outside shot, but I still think it's a very outside shot.
Yeah, and you mentioned the primary. That makes it more difficult. Greg Kidd will spend a ton of money, and so she will have to deplete some of her resources if she is to make it through that primary. I remember 2 years ago talking about this very race, and there was no Democrat that ran for the seat. And so the thought was, hey, maybe, there's this nonpartisan, this newcomer, Greg Kidd, and we ultimately saw what happened in the 2024 election.
He got killed. But one other thing to mention about that race, if I could, Ben, is we still don't know who the Republican nominee is going to be. Filing starts pretty soon, though. We're going to know pretty soon, in less than 2 weeks now. And so I have to tell you, it depends who they nominate, too. If they nominate a real far-right person, I think that will give the Democrats more hope. But even that person, whoever that might be, probably would be a favorite.
We do have to ask about Sam Brown, the former U.S. Senate nominee, who I believe emerged from a social media hiatus only to reply to one of your tweets. Exactly. I think it was to say, "Oh, I didn't see the seat was open," or something like that. What are you hearing about whether or not Sam Brown is going to jump in or not?
Yeah, first of all, you're right. He had been off social media and comes on and says anything happened, and I jokingly replied to it and said Mark Amodei is retiring, and he, to his credit, showing a Mark Amodei-like sense of humor, replied, as you said, "Oh, I had no idea who's going to run." So he's definitely considering it. I don't know if he's going to run or not. I think there's a lot of people waiting in the wings to see what he does, which is kind of weird in one way, in that Sam Brown is considered because he got appointed to this a VA post by Trump, that Trump will endorse him. But you never know with Trump, right? You never know what he might do. But if he runs, I think fewer people will run. But if he doesn't run, you're going to have a lot of people who are interested, including the controller, Andy Matthews, who is obviously waiting to see what Sam Brown does and would be the obvious person, I think, to inherit the Trump endorsement. But you never know. If Joey Gilbert, who was a well-known figure up here and, was, as he likes to say, Trump from the jump, he could get that endorsement too. Trump's endorsement is going to mean a lot, as it does in any primary.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out, because there was so much noise and activity and speculation in the days leading up. It's been a little bit quieter since as people are kind of feeling this thing out. State Senator Ira Hansen said he was considering it and then kind of said he's not. But for the most part, most of those other people, all the names that I've heard floating around, have not definitively said one way or the other. But I think you're right. They're waiting on the Sam Brown announcement whenever that's coming here, as we say, in just less than a few weeks now until candidate filing. All right, John, you're up here for an event with Senator Cortez Masto this evening. Most people probably will listen to this after the event, but what do you hope to get out of Senator Cortez Masto tonight?
Well, I don't want to give away all my questions
Well,
because
of
I'm
course,
sure
yeah.
she's an avid listener of this podcast,
She
right?
is,
And
100%.
So, but listen, there's so much going on in Washington right now, and she has just announced again that she's going to vote against the DHS budget unless there's some guardrails for ICE. So we're certainly going to talk a lot about that. Talk about her relationship with Jackie Rosen and how they split on one of the shutdown votes, and just talk in general about what her goals are. Does she want to be does she want to ascend in leadership? She already has kind of a minor leadership position. Does she want to follow in the footsteps of the guy who essentially, as you pointed out, handpicked her, Harry Reid? Does she want to be the Democratic leader? I'll be fascinated to hear what she says. By the way, as you may know, you probably interviewed her a few times. She's a difficult interview. She does not give up much.
Yeah, well, it's those prosecutors because she was the attorney general, and so they always talk like they are kind of in a lawyerly courtroom setting, and so she's a difficult interview in that sense. But I'm sure you'll do a great job because you will ask a second and third follow-ups as you are known for doing. So, John, thank you so much for coming into the studio here. We appreciate getting some of your time. I'll let you get ready for that interview with Senator Cortez Masto and all the good work at the Nevada Independent. We'll let you get back to it.
Ben, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being on your podcast, and thanks for all the great work you do, too.
Oh, thank you. A special thank you to Jon Ralston and our associate producer, Brian Petrus, who helped with this episode. If you made it to the end of the show, I really appreciate it. If you have guest ideas, episode ideas, questions, comments, compliments, concerns, anything at all, drop me a note. I want to hear from you. My email is bjmargiott, Margiott, at sbgtv.com, and put Ballot Battleground Nevada in the subject line. And if you have a moment, I'd really appreciate it if you left a rating and a review. That helps the podcast show up higher in searches so more people can discover Ballot Battleground Nevada. Thanks for listening.